let's head to our Mike Seidel. He is by the causeway in Tampa, and I know you, Mike, you've seen the wind shift all day long, pushing that bay water and causing some flood concerns in Tampa.
Yes, indeed. We're out here on the causeway, and the winds came around to the southwest overnight 3 or 4 hours ago, and that's when the water started pushing in here towards the causeway. Now, the causeway is fine. I shot some video. We'll get it to you soon. The water is over the parking lot here at the restaurant, and you can see what we see. We were out here live yesterday around these tiki huts. You can see the benches of the tiki huts are just about covered with the Gulf, with the I should say Gulf water coming in through Tampa Bay, waves coming in. I would estimate the surge now between about 2 and 3 feet. The parking lot here is fine, and again, the causeway in the distance, you can see there goes a vehicle by right now, so the causeway is fine. The Sunshine Skyway Bridge, not surprised, it's closed. That's I-275 connecting the peninsulas. Meanwhile, take a look at the radar. No rain in the immediate future. It's really not a bad morning. We've been seeing the almost full supermoon. We had some rain overnight, some heavier showers, some lightning. We saw some power flashes on the way here. Peak wind gusts so far at Tampa International at 53 miles an hour, just gusted to 52, 48 over in St. Pete. And the peak gust I've seen in the area, Sarasota earlier, Sarasota, Bradenton, gusted to 67 miles an hour. So that's our peak right now. And we're just going to watch and see how high the surge goes. One thing working for us is high tide was about an hour ago. So the tide's going to try to go out as this onshore flow pushes the water in. And we're going to have the onshore flow all day today into tonight. Storm surge warning continues. The values haven't changed for the St. Pete area at 4 to 6 feet. So there you go. We're watching, we're waiting. Rainfall so far has been manageable because of the drought, Lynette. We've had just under 2 inches at Tampa International. There have been some higher amounts in the area, but so far, so good. There are no current flash flood warnings in the Tampa-St. Pete area. Lynette?
All right, Mike. Yeah, you actually do need some rain there. It'll start to pick up as the morning goes along. So we'll check back with you. So thank you for that.
All right, let's go and talk to Mike Seidel, who is in Tampa right now. And Mike, as we are seeing, you are seeing the water come up. That was going to be, and always was going to be, the west coast of Florida's problem.
Yes, indeed, with that southwest wind coming in just a few hours ago, so we're getting the push across Tampa Bay, and you can see here at the restaurant, this is where we were yesterday. This was not, there was no water at all. These tiki huts, you can see the water now is continuing to come up just over the benches on the tiki huts. We get first light here in an hour. You'll have a much better idea how the water has encompassed this whole area, not into the parking lot, it's more elevated, and in the distance is the causeway, the Courtney Campbell Causeway, and it is fine, that's not closed. The Skyline Bridge is, mentioned earlier, the peak wind gust so far I've seen in the area, Sarasota to our south at 67 miles an hour. Right now we want to go out to the beach town of Treasure Island, that's out there between St. Pete Beach and Madeira, and bring in their Fire Chief Tripp Bars. And Tripp, I've seen there have been some power outages in Pinellas County, minimal so far at about 4,000. What can you tell us about the situation out there on the Barrier Island this morning?
Yeah, Mike, good morning. About 1 o'clock this morning, we started seeing significant storm surge activity on our Barrier Island. We've had about 3 to 4 feet throughout the island as hampered EMS and fire responses. At one point, we even had a washover where water from and waves from the Gulf of Mexico met up with the Intercoastal Waterway on the other side.
So is there sand and water on the highway there, the Coast Highway?
There is. Our main north-south thoroughfare is Gulf Boulevard. It's still currently under about 3.5, 4 feet of water, so we're having trouble getting out to check on folks who chose not to evacuate, not to heed that mandatory evacuation order. We're getting out there as best we can with our high water vehicles and shallow draft boats, but it's been a difficult night for us, and we're still working through that.
And what about the power where you are, and what do you know about the power out there on the Barrier Island?
So in Treasure Island, we've got just over 1,000 people without power. We've got about 7,000 residents. We're hoping most of them evacuated. We did clear the hotels yesterday, so thankfully we don't have the visitors. But yeah, it's going to be rough when we see. We've definitely got water in homes in the southern part of town. We had a structure fire this morning. The crews had to fight fire from waist-deep water, and there were power lines down. So it's been all around a rough situation.
Okay, Fire Chief Trip Morris from Treasure Island. Thanks for the update. Hang in there. It's going to be a long morning into the afternoon because the wind's going to stay southwest. And I want to tell you where exactly we are to give you an idea. We are about 20 miles as the crow flies due east of Clearwater Beach. So Paul Goodloe is west of here in a straight line across the causeway, which is open. So at this point, we're just going to keep an eye on the water. We're going now towards low tide here on the bay, and that's going to help us out a little bit. But again, the wind is not going to back off today. It's going to be southwest. It will ease off later on this afternoon and this evening. But again, that storm surge warning continues, and the Hurricane Center says 4 to 6 feet, and we're going to be right in there at this point. I'm going to get an update on the Old Bay Tampa gauge and see how we're standing there and how that compares to storm surges in the past. In the meanwhile, Jim Cantori, Cedar Key in the thick of it, and we've got Paul Goodloe at Clearwater Beach as we watch Category 4 Hurricane Idalia heading for a landfall up on the Big Bend later on this morning. Continuing coverage. Stay with us on the Weather Channel.
In fact, we have meteorologist Mike Seidel out towards farther east of me in Tampa. And Mike, you too are probably getting close to low tide, and then your tide coming up probably after ours, which is about noon local.
Yes, our tide is now going out. It's having a tough time because that southwest wind is piling the water in. We are safely protected from the rain to keep our camera dry and operational, and it's blocking some of the wind. Our wind gusts still at the area airports, St. Pete, Petersburg, Tampa, are gusting between 45 and 55 miles an hour. The peak gust I saw overnight was in Sarasota at 67 miles an hour. We are about 20 miles as the crow flies inland. So we're 20 miles east of where Paul is on the beach on the barrier island where there's a mandatory evacuation. We here in this parking lot off the causeway, and this is where we were yesterday, and this tiki hut has now been blown over, washed over by the surge. That was standing up, and the water continues to come up. We could see the benches earlier, and now as the surge comes in and the wave action covers up the tables of these tiki huts. This entire area was dry yesterday. In the distance is the Courtney Campbell Causeway. That's open. That is wide open. I do not think they're going to close that at this point. They have closed the Sunshine Skyway 275. That's not surprising with these kind of winds. Rainfall totals generally around 2 inches. That has not been an issue so far, fortunately. The rain comes and goes in spurts. And look at the radar. Those bands wrapping in. We are right now roughly 130 miles southeast of the center of Cat 4 Idalia. So we're far from the center. The hurricane force winds only extend out 10 to 20 miles. So we're not in any danger basically of getting hurricane force sustained winds. That's not going to happen. Maybe we get a gust close to 70 with one of these bands. We'll see. But we're still going to get the circulation. Remember, counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere. A hurricane is low pressure, so the wind is going to continue to pile the water up here in the Tampa Bay area. The next tide at Old Tampa Bay, that's farther up here, not at the mouth, at the Gulf. The bridge is coming up at about 3:20 this afternoon. Now, here's video I shot earlier. This is about an hour and a half ago. This is the parking lot on the causeway, and you can see the water has come over the beach and over the parking lot and just about up to the bike path and the asphalt walkway on the causeway. Water about 2 feet in most places. You can see the wave action and the wind whipping the flag. This is, again, about 4:15, 4:30 this morning, and the winds at that time were gusting 45 to 50 miles an hour. So far, the surge has impacted the parking lots here, but not any property. This restaurant we're at is up on stilts for good measure. It's built with concrete stilts. So we're going to continue to watch the water come up through the morning hours. When we have daylight, you'll get a real sense of appreciation of what it looks like around here versus yesterday. But right now, I can just explain to you and I show you that this tiki hut is gone. It's floated away, and everything else is right now. Another one has blown over. So the water rising with the southwest wind as expected. Still that storm surge warning in Tampa Bay, 4 to 6 feet. They'll continue that for a while because the wind isn't going to back off and the direction is not going to change through at least this evening. Tomorrow, the wind's back off. By the way, Tampa International again today, not much better than yesterday. All flights canceled yesterday. Today, so far, 90% of flights have been canceled. And tomorrow, most of the flights right now are up on the board. So, Jim Cantori in Cedar Key, you've got, I think you mentioned, about a 4-foot surge. I'm trying to get the latest from the gauge here, but based upon where we were yesterday in dry ground, we are up about 3 feet, my estimate here in Tampa. Jim?
Yeah, and that's the way it is kind of all on the coast. We're a little higher here because we stick out.
Let's go to Mike Seidel. Thank you very much. Mike Seidel, who's in Tampa. And Mike, you've had a heck of a 12 hours here. Let's go back to the beginning in this morning when you had that water rise and that push of water. How quickly did it recede?
It went away pretty quickly because it kind of timed out with the tide going out, Steph. We hit 4.18 at the gauge, but let me emphasize that gauge only goes back about 30 or 35 years, so it's not a long-standing period of record. But still, with that said, it was the highest level they've seen since about 1990. The sun is out, a nice breeze off the water. The storms have stayed pretty much south of us. They had a pretty good one around St. Pete in the past hour. Temperature now 84. Heat index 96. Thank God for the breeze. Let me show you the parking lot here in the causeway. And the causeway never closed down. This was all underwater this morning. We had waves hitting out there on the asphalt walkway, bikeway. And now we can show you what it looked like this morning. This is about 9 a.m. as we got some overwash and debris blowing up on the causeway. But again, they kept it open. The Skyway 275 reopened late morning. That's good news. And schools, at least here in Hillsborough County, will reopen tomorrow. The airport, too. Only about 17 flights canceled tomorrow. Today, 85% of the flights are canceled at Tampa International. Back here in Tampa, some improvements certainly tomorrow for getting in and out of here from the airport. The past couple of days, they canceled nearly all of 800 flights. Tomorrow, at this point, only 16 flights are canceled. So if you're trying to get in and out of the Suncoast via airline, things are getting much better as we head into tomorrow and Labor Day weekend.
Now, I want to bring back in our meteorologist, Mike Seidel, who has been in Tampa, Florida. And Mike, help walk us through what has been going on in Tampa and kind of how the day has played out for you, and especially to the storm surge.
Yeah, certainly the worst weather was this morning before sunrise. Once the southwest wind came in here, it pushed the bay over this parking lot and up towards the causeway. The causeway never closed, but there was a debris line up there, and they did close the Sunshine Parkway 275 because of the wind restrictions. I'll show you what it looked like. I hiked over here this morning and grabbed this video about 4:30 a.m. Eastern. You can see the waves lapping and over the seawall into the parking lot. That building with the flags, that actually not a building, but that trailer is no longer where it's sitting. In fact, tonight it's sitting on the other side of the parking lot. Now, they had worse weather back towards the beaches. We're about 18, 19 miles due east of Clearwater Beach. You go over the causeway, you're there, and we had water all over the streets. Paul Goodlow was riding through there with the police in a Humvee, and water in some folks' homes, and they did have the mandatory evacuation over there. And also, you know, you're right on the Gulf of Mexico, and that water got blown literally into the streets there as he went through this morning. Things have eased off now because the wind is backed off, and we went through a tide cycle. Now the tide is starting to come in, but there's really no chance of, I should say, this tide starting to go out. But a high tide this afternoon, the water did not come back into the parking lot. What I want to show you is one of those quintessential things you see in Florida, the sunset. And we've got a beauty for you this evening through the palm trees out here on the bay. Sunset about 15 minutes ago, and look at that shot. By the way, the heat index right now is 101 degrees. It really doesn't feel like it because we have that breeze. Thank goodness for the breeze. Wind's still running at about 10 miles an hour. Schools are back in session. Most of those reopening tomorrow. Some of those were used as shelters. And as far as Tampa International goes, much, much better tomorrow. Yesterday, all the flights were canceled. Today, about 85% of the 400 scheduled flights. Tomorrow, I just checked again, 16 flights canceled. Power outages, about 6,000 down in Sarasota County, and over in Pinellas County, just over 3,000. Here in Hillsborough County, I just saw 212 customers without power. So things Doing pretty good here in Tampa, despite the surge of just over 4 feet. The highest, Colleen, we've seen on record, but the record for that gauge only goes back about 30 years. All things considered, we fared very well. Unfortunately, much worse up through the Nature Coast and the Big Bend. Still, it'll be interesting to see what the final surge was in those areas. But considering Jim Cantori had over 6.5 feet, more than likely those surges up there did verify between the forecasted 8 to 12 feet.
Yes, certainly seeing some verification there. Thank you so much, Mike Seidel, right now in Tampa.
But we head farther to the south, down into Florida. That's Tampa, where we find our very own meteorologist, Mike Seidel. And Mike, certainly things improved throughout the day, looking much brighter. You had some sunshine. Now things have, of course, darkened up in the night. But how did the city fare with this storm?
It did pretty well. The worst of it was the surge this morning, a 4.18 foot surge at the gauge in Old Tampa Bay. Now, that's a record, but with the disclaimer that the period of record only goes back about 30 years. The damage, the debris primarily around town where we've been, palm fronds, that's it. Not a huge amount of cleanup. Power outages, very few here in Hillsborough County, about 212 right now. There were a few more this morning. We still have several thousand without power across the Causeway and over into Pinellas County, the Clearwater Beach area, North Reddington Beach, several thousand without power there, but that's a small percentage of residents. They did have some water in homes over there. We had some water this morning over the Causeway, the Courtney Campbell Causeway. This is about 8:30 this morning as we had that record-setting surge, and you can see waves going over the seawall and onto parts of the Causeway and the debris. Winds at this point were gusting about 50 miles an hour. The peak gust at Tampa International was, I say just 53 miles an hour, because until you get up to about 60 or 70, you usually don't have a huge issue with power, and that was pretty much the case in this area. Down in Sarasota, where they have 6,000 customers without power, the airport there in Sarasota, Bradenton, gusted to 67, so you see kind of the difference in that threshold. Meanwhile, rainfall totals around the area generally 2.5 to 3 inches. It came, and then it stopped, and another band came in. So because it didn't rain consistently for a long time like it is right now up there in the Midlands of South Carolina and Santee, where Alex is, up 95 towards Florence, we didn't have a flash flood issue primarily because of that. And as far as I know, there were never any flash flood warnings in this area. And Tampa International finally tomorrow, only 16 flights canceled after about 800 canceled yesterday and today. More coverage on the Weather Channel all night long, so stay with us.